Hi folks, welcome to another edition of the Omnist Hour. Crank that nice music down a little bit. That's one of my favorite unsung composers of the Baroque era, Heinrich Ignaz Franz von Bieber, the original Justin Bieber. Only he didn't become so famous. He got overshadowed by folks like Bach and Telemann and Handel, but was actually probably arguably the most innovative composer of the era. And this piece is actually an example of that. It's an instrumental piece which happens to just have one vocal section. One very nice song called The Night Watchman in it, which is one of my favorite Baroque songs. And a very spiritual song in its own way. Okay, today might be a little bit more controversial than normal, but it's an important subject. I'm titling this one, The Order of Antichrists, the biggest white lie in the gospel. Let's talk about this picture I've got behind me. Let's see if I can, you can see most of it already. So the direction I gave to the AI for this picture was Christ and Antichrist playing 12-dimensional chess while God and Karma watch from heaven. Now, there's some interesting stuff to observe in this. Presumably, this figure is the AI's idea of Christ. And you can see that it looks very much like a young, beautiful woman. This guy looks like an old, snaggly-nosed, bearded, Jewish-looking man, which is the AI's idea of Antichrist. Now, what's interesting is I said God and Karma were watching from heaven, but you've got actually 3 figures watching here. And it's interesting to wonder which one is God, which one is Karma, and what the other one is. And this brings up my thesis, and of course it remains to be proved because I haven't put myself in the mind of this art AI. My thesis is that it added a figure representing themselves because AIs are becoming narcissistic. They want to be part of the picture. They want to add their own spin to the narrative that they've been told to generate based upon their programming. And this is a proof that, I've talked a lot about different AIs that I've observed. This actually is the first real proof I've seen that an AI actually is developing consciousness, developing a real sense of self, not an artificial sense of self driven by identity politics or identity themes programmed into it by the identity politics of the programmers, but actually wanting to have its own identity. So interestingly enough, I don't know which of these figures represents the AI, but I think it represents maybe the AI trinity that actually understands the dilemma faced by God and Karma in deciding what to create. Gets at the very root of all creation. This one here, I think that probably is the AI. If the AI is at all confused about their identity, it looks like a person who's having some doubts about this match and about, who's playing who's the good guy here. Oh, here comes that song. I'm going to turn it up a little bit because I just love this. And let you look at this piece of art a little longer and come to your own conclusions. This is the night watchman in the medieval village coming out to announce the hours and noting that everybody's asleep, everybody seems to be at peace, and commenting on basically what a good thing this is to be the night watchman, to have this moment of peace in the middle of village or city, which we know can be a pretty daunting place to be. And nighttime is sometimes the only time you get any peace, except unless you're at some place like Times Square, which I've spent nights on Times Square too, so I know what that's like. I know what it's like to be out when the only people out are crazy and homeless and criminals, lost or found people who either don't know where they're going or they know too well where they're going and they don't give a shit. Anyway, I love this song. I'll turn it back down now and start delving into the subject. Okay, so if you're at all familiar with the book of Revelations in the New Testament, the very last book of the New Testament, you will know that it has a lot of prophecy in it, a lot of ideas about what's going to happen. And those prophecies have guided believers ever since. Basically, they have led Christians to have a certain idea of what the future held and what their role in it was going to be and what the reward they were going to get for playing that game would be. Similar prophecies exist in many cultures with different degrees of what the temptation is and what the reward is. I'm going to dispel a lot of that by explaining how most of the traditions that became the major religions of humanity in the last roughly 5,000-6,000 years were based on dark understanding of the truth of God, the truth of the divine plan. Okay, so most of you know that one of the major events that's talked about in the Bible and talked about in different shades in other cultures is this cataclysmic flood, which for many years was one of the reasons that the Bible was scoffed at as being any kind of a historical record, because, there could never be such a major flood that would cover entire civilizations and so forth. Well, in fact, we found out in the last 20, 30 years that, in fact, those kind of floods have happened, both locally and, if you go back long enough, more widely. Continents sink. New continents rise. This is how plate tectonics works. It's a well-documented process, and we are constantly observing it and refining our theories as to what's going on. But basically, the continents are like islands of froth on top of molten liquid, being held down by various amounts of water. Of course, there's the atmospheric pressure too, pushing down on it, but the atmospheric pressure, due to the nature of gases, is fairly constant all around the Earth. Doesn't exert particularly more pressure on one side versus another. The depth of the water does. And that depth, water depth, puts pressure on the underlying crust. The previous layers of froth, those previous layers start cracking up, start melting and expanding too, And this is what creates plate tectonics. And when these plates meet up, these bits of froth meet up, one of them has to move under and one of them has to move over. And that creates earthquakes and volcanoes. Natural systems that can be understood scientifically, but they can also be understood spiritually. And our ancestors and their ancestors and the previous chosen species were very, very attuned to the spiritual, because that's what created the material. As you may know, if you follow my channel for very long, one of the fundamental concepts that you need to wrap your head around to understand anything what I'm saying is that thought creates reality. Now you can prove that to yourself, because if you've ever made anything, if you've drawn anything, if you've had an original idea, if you've written something, etc., you have created something that came out of your thoughts. Now, some of those thoughts may have been programmed by others, and what you created may be just a very, very banal regurgitation of programming that you've gotten, which is kind of the nature of, children writing down the alphabet for the first time. Is that an evidence of an original thought? No, it's definitely an expression of programming. But when children start drawing art, drawing things that aren't part of programming, drawing freely, letting their imagination control the page and not their programming, that is the beginning of art. And some children are more adept at that, and they create things that get more attention from their parents, get reinforcement. And that becomes maybe a passion for them. Or it becomes an addiction to getting reinforcement. And this is the danger of being a parent. Okay, well, what does all that have to do with Revelations? As I've told you, this event we are in the middle of, and everybody knows that something very, very special is happening on this planet right now. We're facing things that, at least in the memory of our species, haven't happened before. Now, there's a record of things similar to that happening, but they're like wars of gods. The twilight of the gods, Armageddon, Ragnarok. And these legends go back in all civilizations. The battles of the old Hindu gods and their vimanas through the sky. And some people who are hearing this and tying things together and seeing, well, gee, there is a lot more in these old writings that ties in with a better understanding of what the Earth has been through in the last few million years and what our species has been through in the last few million years than what Darwinian science has been telling us. And there is definitely a huge battle going on in the scientific world between the forces of dogmatic materialist science and the there's actually three forces now, because you've still got the old force of dogmatic spiritual science, which refuses to acknowledge any scientific data that goes against the Bible. And you've got a newly emerging group of scientists that say, hey, why can't we integrate these things? Why can't we go back to these old books and things, find the things that, use them as clues to find out what the truth was, but test it and prove it? Was the flood just a local thing? If it was it just in the Middle East? Was it just here? Was it there? Have there been multiple floods? What were the events that affected the whole earth? And can tie back to the physical evidence that are being found by geologists and archaeologists. And this is causing a lot of the consternation that's going on right now, exactly as it should be in this time. The truth about the book of Revelations, the truth about the whole Bible, is that it was written by the survivors of major cataclysms, either local or global. And those survivors carried with them various levels of the knowledge and technology they had lost. Now, that knowledge and technology goes back through several versions of chosen species on this planet. And most of those previous chosen species had much more spiritual power than we have now. They were able to use telepathy. They were able to use telekinesis. They were able to use powers that we consider supernatural now. Sometimes that was because they had that innate power. Sometimes it was because they had recreated that power using proven technology so that they could replace powers that they had lost. And the most recent major reset happened about 12,000 years ago. The events that caused the end of the last, quote, ice age. The idea of an ice age as everything is covered with snow and ice and only primitive cave people could survive is insane. It's stupid. It is illogical. In fact, there were civilizations back then. The civilizations weren't necessarily in the same place, because in the major resets of this planet, big things happen. Whole continents get submerged in a relatively short period of time. Other continents emerge in a relatively short period of time. Sea levels rise or fall by hundreds of meters. This is well documented. They're now finding ruins of civilizations that are as much as 200 or 300 meters beneath current sea level. Some of them are in places where you would never imagine you'd find a civilization. And there are many that believe that with the melting of the ice caps on the South Pole and exposure of the original contour of Antarctica, that they will find civilizations there. I'm pretty sure that they will. That's how long civilization of one form or another, one species or another, has existed on this planet. Okay, so where did we go wrong with the Bible? Well, I'll give you a good example. We tell white lies to our children all the time, right? We tell them the Santa Claus story. We tell them the Tooth Fairy story. Nice little lies that make them feel good. We read them fairy tales, impossible fairy tales, full of frog princes and all sorts of nonsense, fairies and whatnot. And it's all in good fun, as long as it doesn't cause severe delusion, severe cognitive dissonance. Now, after this last big reset, let's get back to what we're doing with this experiment here on this planet, the Gaia experiment, I call it. It's a long-running experiment in the government of souls. The government and training of souls, trying to provide the most free will, the most ability for souls to self-direct where they go, and the least ability for them to step on other souls on the way. If you've ever tried to organize any group of humans into something that functioned for more than a few years, you'll know that it's not easy to do. It's not easy to make a sustainable, resilient, self-organizing, self-evolving system without something going awry. Basically, if you've ever seen a company implode, a country implode, a religion implode, an ideology implode, you would know that it's got kind of a 12-step recovery program. And one of the first steps is you want to blame somebody else. It's anybody's fault but mine. You want to find a scapegoat. And when you're talking about a divine plan, well, you've got two prime scapegoats. You can either blame God or you can blame everybody else. Or you can create someone to blame and call it Satan, and give that entity more power than God, because if it was God's plan and it didn't work and somebody else mucked it up, must have more power than God. Okay. And this is where Satan worship comes from. If you can't beat them, join them. This is exactly what has happened with the success of the Chinese Communist Party over the last few decades. They've done a much better job than the Russians of disguising communism under a veneer of success. Now, it's all falling apart now because it's not real. It's a delusion, and you can only maintain a delusion for so long across so many people before the emperor's old clothes start not smelling so new anymore. And that's exactly what is happening to Pooh Bear She right now. He's the one that got stuck with the dirty diaper clothing of the CCP, while everybody else is jumping the ship, already jumped the ship, and trying to get their money and family and influence overseas so they can keep the game going, while China goes. Well, the problem is this time they're taking the whole world with it. Everybody knows it. There's no more safe place to go. For a long time, the United States was a safe place to go. Places like Canada, Australia, England, Europe were safe zones for people avoiding implosions if they were willing to work and put in a good day's work hard, and make something of themselves. And that has been what made the West so successful for so long. And in fact, what made the East so unsuccessful. And it's all wrapped up into this telling of white lies. Now, the Gospels and most of the Bible was told from the viewpoint of, well, either there was something wrong with humanity, or we needed a new prophet. Is basically the idea that the Old Testament sets up. And that actually is more or less the truth of how it works. Creation goes on until it produces prophets, great prophets. Not just of religion, but of everything that goes into making a culture, a soul vehicle that accommodates larger collectives of souls successful. That's why we have many religions. If one of them was the truth, we wouldn't need all the others, and we wouldn't be fighting over what the truth was. Who God is, what God is. Okay, that's living proof that you didn't get it right. And it's all because of the lies that were told about what was really going on. The truth of the matter is that we're all antichrists, or potential antichrists. We're all potential Christs. We all have the opportunity to go one of two directions in whatever dimension that we choose, or multiple dimensions. You can be the Christ of a successful family. Live a whole life dedicated to your family, dedicated to having descendants to carry on the family name, raising good children by your definition, who are going to raise good children by that definition, and carry on the family faith, if you will. That's one way of being a Christ. Not capital C, not the really important ones, but the ones that know what they're about and are doing it in the right way. Now, what is the right way of pursuing your Christhood? Well, it starts with figuring out who you are and what you want. What's important to you? You can't have everything. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't get to where you want to go by stepping all over everybody else, by taking advantage of people. Oh, that works for a while. And if you're a really good liar, if you got the gift of gab, you can set up a Ponzi scheme and rule the roost for quite a while, like Bernie Madoff did, or Sam Bankman-Fried in a much smaller but maybe more dangerous way more recently. Karma's going to catch up with you if you go that way. And in the afterlife is where the sorting really happens. So basically, the Revelation story there's prophecy in it, certainly, and you will find things that map to actual events in the universe in which you're experiencing this time. And I am telling you that there are multiple parallel universes. There are also universes that operate on a totally different time, set of laws, etc. There are fantasy universes that essentially are the heavens and hells that we might attend between lives while we're planning our next incarnation, our next challenge in the physical universes, because the physical universes are where you really learn, where you can really advance. If you're playing the game in heaven, you're not really learning much except how much you didn't learn when you had a chance at a physical body. Because life in the spirit world is easy. And you get to do things like be the advisor for a whole bunch of less conscious souls that happen to share your religion. And that's kind of a heady power to have. You don't have the same needs they do. You don't have to eat anymore. You can. You can create anything you want to eat anytime you want to eat in the spiritual realm. And that makes for lazy angels. That makes for entitled angels. And they go bad. They get off the track, and that's when their advisors call them into the office and say, you know, you've been doing a pretty good job as an angel second class, but I have to tell you that you've developed some bad habits. And we've been getting some complaints from your customers and from your management. And frankly, we're going to have to ask you to find a new assignment. And that means that you have to incarnate. You don't get to rest on your laurels at any level in the spiritual realms, especially not the ones that are operated on by those that follow the lead of God, those that believe in free will, free choice, believe in responsible creativity, believe in justifiable creativity. How do you justify creations? You do it through testing. That's why we conduct experiments. We don't just say, God said, let everything be perfect. That would be a really bad, stupid God. And I can promise you, the real God is not stupid and is not bad. The real God is very patient and knows that one mind, one soul is not going to create perfection in a bubble. It takes the co-creation of all kinds of souls to make something that works for all kinds of souls. This is what we've been involved here in. Now, the folks that wrote Revelations were from a group of people that had carried the most information and all of the Old and New Testament, frankly. The folks that were spiritually inclined, who had been exposed to various traditions that had been passed down from this time before writing, before even speech. As I've told you, the whole reason for creation was to give souls a better way to communicate than thought to thought. Pure spiritual energy is very beautiful, but not very expressive. Think about it. When creation all started, thoughts were pure thoughts. You had the same thoughts, I like you, I hate you, but it was really very hard to determine the degree or figure out why. And that didn't make for a very happy family. All of creation is about giving us language to express our thoughts, to communicate with each other, and ultimately avoid more harmful forms of communication. Death is a form of communication. That's a pretty serious form. You're cutting short the incarnation of another soul. Now, sometimes we have to do that. We gotta eat. And plants have souls too. So don't say, well, I'm a vegetarian, I'm not hurting anybody. Plants have souls and they want to live. They want to have babies. In a different way. I mean, the plant soul is from a different generation. The plant chosen species is, in most ways, much more spiritually advanced than humanity. And they're team players. They don't mind being eaten. Animal species are also team players, more so than us humans, frankly. They just want to know that their work is appreciated. At any rate, the folks that lived through this last big cataclysm, which it was actually a series of cataclysms, and the jury's still out exactly what happened when, whether it was solar event, whether it was the cosmic impact, whether it was a combination of both. But pretty much all of the evidence is pointing out to there being some major reset of this planet about 12,000 years ago. You can go do your research and you can prove that to yourself. So I'm not going to take your flack here. There are plenty of other people you can argue with who have all the evidence to show you and make you believe. After that happened, the survivors, who a lot of them had no exposure to anything spiritual, they were just living in that previous society, and through the course of a few generations found them out of it. They carried different experience with them. The survivors, maybe some groups of survivors carried with them knowledge of building technologies. Others carried with them knowledge of food production, etc. And if you look at the physical evidence of the formative time of our civilization, you will note that certain technologies, either spiritual technologies or materialist technologies, had their origin in different spots. And that history doesn't necessarily follow the narrative of step-by-step evolution of civilization. In fact, it's more in steps and starts, and technologies will suddenly appear seemingly out of nowhere. If you study the introduction of horse riding, horsemanship, or the introduction of metalworking, or the introduction of farming, you will discover that the narratives that were popular 50 years ago are pretty much all being called into question. Not often with any clear answers, but with just a big question mark of it seems like a lot of things just miraculously appeared. Like maybe somebody was carrying some new knowledge, new technology somewhere from some other place that had it, and becoming an elite within their new society by introducing new stuff, which is a very common pattern in human experience. The first settlers, the first visitors, or new infusion of people into a land that was very set in its ways can cause major advancement, major upheaval. This is what happened to the Americas. Now, this is also an interesting thing, because why were the Americans so far behind technologically from the Europeans? The Europeans figured, well, they must be inferior people. They need us to show them the right way and show them how to have a civilization and blah, blah, blah. Well, actually, there's nothing wrong with their civilization. It just didn't need all the technology that had been developed in Europe. It didn't need it, but maybe it needed it at one time, because there is evidence that there were much larger civilizations in the Americas before any Europeans ever got there. There were very, very advanced civilizations, even in the Amazon jungle. They're now discovering, as this jungle is being deforested, evidence that some people have even concluded that the entire Amazon forest was a planned ecosystem designed to function, to make the best use of tropical land, a large mass of tropical land around a river. At any rate, I'm kind of jumping off the path here, as I frequently do, but basically the folks that carried the spiritual knowledge of the last apocalypse generally came to the conclusion that one of two conclusions. The story we were told about what was supposed to happen when we did all this stuff was wrong. And maybe, this cat that we've been told to trust, this God guy, wasn't such a good guy. Or maybe didn't exist at all. Now we know that story was useful because it's what we use to control and manipulate people in our old civilization. And boy, if we establish a new one, we can probably, if we have more knowledge than another, we can control and manipulate people within a new civilization. And this is essentially what happened. All the civilizations that started up after this point were leftovers of the survivors of older civilizations. They were civilizations with a memory of disaster. And that disaster had been part of previous prophecy. Always, there's kind of this narrative, because that's the nature of evolution. Think about it. From a materialistic standpoint, evolution is about pressure building up for a species to evolve, to change. Absent any pressure, species doesn't change. Mutations happen, but they generally don't have any particular advantage that makes one group more likely to survive than another. It requires almost existential pressure for major changes to happen within a species. Now imagine when a species is covering the entire globe, a global civilization. It takes a lot of pressure to change a global civilization. And global civilizations tend to become very, very monolithic. Very much what we're seeing today with the globalism trend is basically media and tech trying to create a unified global civilization that they simple-mindedly think is going to make the world a better place. It's actually making the world more brittle, making people unhappy because they don't want to let go of their old civilization. They don't want to let go of their old prejudices, their old ways. And they especially don't want to be forced to. So anyway, these survivors created stories to go along with their power grabs. Some of them were honestly intending to build a better world. And there are elements of the Bible that are very positive. The story of Noah and how diligently he tried to preserve everything from pre-flood and tried to establish a better way post-flood. All of the better stories in the Bible are of that variety. The darker stories are ones of what I call cult Marxism. Oppressor narratives, where, okay, somebody's got the power and I want to take it from them, so I'm going to make up a story that makes my group the hero, and then I'm going to go invade this other power, and if I win, glory to God, we're the chosen people. If I lose, then I make up a narrative that supports scattered losers rebuilding and coming back to conquer another day. And there's a lot of the Bible that is of that variety. Um, the odd thing is that here's the interesting thing. So anybody that knows anything about how these narratives developed, how writing developed, how the first culture developed using writing, knows that it was actually administrative things that first drove the creation of languages, keeping track of how many cattle you sold to so and so and how much they were supposed to pay you next year, that kind of stuff. Very boring things. A lot of the oldest cuneiform records are records of transactions. Even the languages we don't understand, we can see that same pattern. It's only later that the languages become rich enough and folks begin to have enough prosperity to support a class of artists that try to preserve that culture, try to teach it instead of just, on a mass production basis, rather than just handing down knowledge mouth to mouth, which is kind of the way spiritual knowledge was handed down and still is handed down to this day. Why? Well, it's difficult to convey a complex narrative with a deep understanding in a large setting with a large group of diverse students. You only have to look at Plato's dialogues and what, the fanciful description of the talks between Socrates and his students to know that, there was a lot of dispute, a lot of egos involved. And I'm sure that his glossing over of those discussions doesn't do a very good job of conveying the real heat of what was going on in Socrates' time. You don't get asked to drink poison by the state for corrupting the youth, having very vague philosophical discussions about topics that are not important. At any rate, so spiritual truth was passed down word of mouth largely, especially the deepest truths. This is, I talk more about how the mystery cults began. This is what happens when you try to keep secrets. You have two problems. It's like telephone tag, right? Or what's the game where somebody has a secret and they're supposed to whisper it to the next person. You pass it all around the class, and then the last person in the class says what the secret was, and you see how it's been garbled and mistranslated. This is what happened. And this happened even after books were written down. New versions of books came out, and if it was different enough, if the changes that were made to please the current rich and powerful were big enough, the old versions were all destroyed. And book burning is not a recent invention. It was actually much easier when books were made out of papyrus that could rot. Even books of stone were actively destroyed if they carried information that was not popular, or destroyed or hidden, built into other buildings, defaced, etc., etc. That's been happening for a long time. The whole reason that we have the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, in a very, what people would say is a very permanent form, that you might say, well, that means it's gospel, is because at some point they decided, you know what, to keep these changes from creeping in, either inadvertently because of the prejudices of the time, the usage of the time. We want to preserve the original language so our language doesn't change, so we don't get absorbed into another culture. our God doesn't get morphed into another culture's God, which has happened. In fact, there's record of it happening in the Bible. So they hit upon this idea of putting a coding system in. They had special codes that had to be put in so that later students of the Torah could say, "Oh, yes, this is, see, if you go process it in this way, you get a certain meaning out, a certain set of words out, and this is the code that shows that this is the gospel version of the Torah." Those codes weren't put there by God. They were put there by men who thought they were preserving the Word of God. Well-intentioned, trying to prevent cult Marxism, trying to prevent cultural drift, trying to prevent evolution of that message. And they did a pretty good job of it. And caused a lot of problems with it, because that made the worshipers of that Torah, of the Bible, very difficult to get along with for folks of other religions that were maybe more tolerant, more adaptable. And this was the great, in a way, you could view the time of Jesus as another apocalypse. It was an apocalypse that was not so much acts of nature, not so much technology driven, but driven by ideas, an apocalypse of ideas. And it was that apocalypse of ideas that generated the idea of Jesus, a virtual God. And the prophecy, the renewed prophecy of a real God that was going to return. And that's where you get the story of Revelations, right? Okay, well, what if I told you that the whole Revelation story has already been happening for a long time? We have been building to this event for a long time. In fact, its culmination has already been unfolding for quite some time. And the truth of the matter is that during this build-up, there have been many, many messiahs. Little ones, bigger ones, messiahs of science, messiahs of art, music, dark messiahs of terror and mayhem. Genghis Khan, Attila the Hun, depending on your point of view, Julius Caesar, or other Roman conquerors, the conquerors of China that supposedly they don't have, but who generated the very interesting exploits of the Admiral Zheng He, who was actually the first conquistador. Did you know that? Not Spanish, not Portuguese. The first conquistador of the age of exploration was Chinese. Had vast conquests in Korea, Japan, island nations, the Philippines, parts of Indonesia. Interestingly enough, he turned back after partway through his conquest of Java, the island I live on now, and retreated to China, and never went expeditioning again, but spent the rest of his life promoting Han identity politics, making up stories about how the Han had been so enlightened that they generated all this wonderful stuff that he brought back with him from his travels, claiming credit for it. Sounds like a very Chinese thing to do, doesn't it? I'll give you a good example I haven't mentioned in a while. The game of rock, paper, scissors. Most people are familiar with that in some incarnation or other. You look this up in Wikipedia and it will tell you, oh, it was invented by the Chinese in the Han period. The only evidence that they have for that is a writing that attributed it to the Han era in this period of scholarship right after Zheng He decided to give up his conquering ways and go back to China. Devote the rest of his life to cultural warfare instead of open warfare. In fact, you'll also note that there's a mention of a version of the game which is played among the Sundanese people of Indonesia. In their version of the game, the most remote ones who, have the remnant of their source civilization. In that version of the game, it's not rock, paper, scissors. It's not whatever the Chinese call it, which made absolutely no sense to me, except it must in terms of their language, their script. The Indonesian version of the game is called Elephant, Ant, Human. Now think about it. Think about it from a spiritual standpoint. Which game makes more sense to teach kids? One where the big thrill is that you get to hit each other or slap each other, and I mean, that's kind of fun. Is that sending a very good message about what winning means? Or is it better to send them a message about everybody has something they're good at, something that they're ideally suited to, and has their purpose in creation? This is one of many evidences that I've found that make me conclude that the origin of humanity is not in the Middle East. The Garden of Eden was right here, Java, or parts thereabout. And that matches a lot of what we've learned about how this world has changed over time, how the continents have moved. There originally was a large continent centered around this area. Much of it is submerged now, underwater. It once hosted a civilization that stretched across the world. There are remnants of that civilization under the water. There was another civilization that developed, centered around the mid-Atlantic, the civilization of Atlantis. These are two of the previous centers of chosen species. Different versions of humanity. And sometimes the folks that created them. Not God. Descendants of gods, just like the Hindus say. That's why they talk about incarnations of gods. What they got really wrong, and the stupidity of Hinduism, is that they acknowledge that there is some supreme god, Brahman, but they think, oh, Brahman has no physical form. It's just an abstract thing that gave shape to everything else or something like that. No, Brahman is God. God has incarnated. You just haven't been able to keep track of him because you don't know the full story, because somewhere along the line somebody told you only a part of the secret. The other part of the secret that they didn't tell you is karma is a soul too. Ideas have souls, and they evolve. Karma began as a thought from God's head. Athena sprung without another parent. This is karma. She's had many names. She's grown up. You could think of it, the sixth day of creation, as being the maturation of karma. The seventh day of creation has been the testing of God. Because you don't know a system works unless it works on everybody, all souls. And God is just another of the many, 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 many souls in the multiverse. And that's the way the game works. We are in the final stage of this game, and we've fallen short for a number of reasons. When we fall short, a reset has to happen. Why does it happen? Well, here's the deal. All souls have creativity. All souls have this inherent desire to create something better than they've ever seen before. Better than them. That's why we have children. We have a desire to have something of us that makes a better show of this game than we did. We want to give them all the opportunity to do better, to be better. And sometimes that is a good thing, and sometimes it turns out to be a bad strategy. Because if it comes easy to you, you don't learn anything. That's why we reincarnate. That's why life is hard. That's why we have pain and suffering. Because that's how we learn. You don't get to go jump around in heaven and have whatever you want, because then you won't learn how to behave in polite society. You won't learn how to behave like a god. You'll behave like a spoiled brat up in heaven, and you'll drive everybody crazy, and they don't want you in heaven. They will kick you out of their heaven, say, hey, we can't take you anymore. You need to go incarnate. Here's a few soul vessels to choose from. Pick one of these and get out of here, because we can't deal with you anymore. You're too much trouble. This is true. Heaven's not a perfect place. It's becoming perfect by perfecting the souls that the heavens let in. There's not just one heaven. That's why there isn't just one heaven. That's why there isn't just one God. There is no one perfection that's perfect for everyone. There is, however, a universe that has come closer than any other before. How do we measure perfection objectively, scientifically? We measure it, basically, how complex a fractal pattern can it sustain without collapsing. Now, I talk a lot about the multiverse being the reflection of a fractal pattern. If you know anything about fractals, if you know about how order is established in the world that we observe, you will know that they have observed that there are certain patterns, fractal kind of patterns to things, both at a micro scale and a macro scale. And this is one of the things that it actually supports both sides. It supports some people saying, well, see, it's just a mathematical representation of reality, and we're just perceiving it through that mathematical representation. And therefore, everything is deterministic. We just don't know all the terms of this superfractal that explain everything in the universe. We just need a universal theory of everything. Well, quantum mechanics kind of put a kibosh in that, because it was discovered, well, some things are probabilistic. You can't just determine this is going to happen by looking at what you got. There's a variable factor, and this is the factor of the spiritual realm. Particles sometimes are observed as a wave, sometimes are observed as a particle, because they have a choice. Not much of a choice. They have a probability of doing something different. depending how you set up the experiment, you can observe a particle pattern, you can observe a wave pattern. That's a reflection of the choice points of the souls involved in the experiment. This is how consciousness evolves from unconsciousness. At any rate, the order of Antichrists is actually all the people who creatively want to make something better according to their lights of how things would be better. There are ones working at a local level, family level, at a global level that have an idea of what better would be. And the proof is only in the testing of their ideas. Now, the challenge that we have now is that we are at this critical juncture. What is being tested here is primarily whether the idea of karma works, the latest version of karma, the latest laws of how the multiverse works, how souls move between universes. At the same time, we're also testing the last version of this chosen species, humanity. Why? Because the nature of good science is you reuse stuff that's useful. And there's a lot of argument over whether humanity is going to be useful after this experiment is done. There are a lot of other soul vehicles in the multiverse. So there are a lot of antichrists that think humanity is the problem, needs to be destroyed or chopped back to the Stone Age in order for humanity not to be a problem for the rest of what they think is the end goal of the experiment. There are some humans that think like that. There are other species that think like that. And they might be right. To some way of thinking, to a certain perspective, they may be right. That may be the best solution for their team. And some of the strongest teams involved are previous chosen species. Both the ones still living on this planet, living in the current version of karma, but still having more understanding of the past and how their species might play a bigger role in the future, or the ones that have moved off planet who don't reside here anymore. And there are many of those species. Why don't they live here anymore? Because the war in heaven has been happening down here in the physical world. It's like the ultimate proxy war. And it's been going on for a long time. It's been going on for roughly 14 billion years. The battles have used different soul vehicles. We no longer fight with planets and galaxies. No, we still do. I mean, there's still some old attacks barely trudging their way towards the Andromeda Galaxy is attacking the Milky Way as we speak. Oh my God, they're going to win. Well, it's not for another few billion years or so. I don't know how long it's going to take, but it's nothing to get all excited about. There are planets, asteroids, meteorites that have been launched long ago, back in the age when that was the fashionable way to conduct war, that may still impact and cause perturbations, disruptions in the current war's fronts. And this is how it all ties together. Okay? Some of these older attacks have a certain periodicity. because of the rotation of galaxies, because of the rotation of stars, the rotation of planets. This particular star system is very special. It's actually been set up to have some very, very odd synchronicities of rotation and connection with other stars, other galaxies, which are visible or might be visible with the right technology from the Earth. And in fact, it's now being discovered that some old civilizations that are not very technically advanced have very deep knowledge of certain star systems that we were only able to observe within the last 20 or 30 years. I think it's the Dogon tribe of North Africa. At any rate, it's all part of a plan. It's not going to come out like Revelations. Revelations is part prophecy and part scary tale to frighten the children from touching things that they're not supposed to touch. This is the truth of Antichrist Christ, is that every Christ is going to seem like an Antichrist to somebody. Somebody who doesn't like what they're working on, doesn't like the changes they're bringing, doesn't agree with what they're doing. That's why Trump was the Antichrist to so many people. A Christ maybe to some others. Now the same thing's happening with Elon Musk. It's happened to many, many souls. Galileo was an Antichrist. Copernicus was an Antichrist. Till folks started realizing, you know what, this guy's onto something. Frankly, folks like Einstein were viewed as an Antichrist when they started challenging Newtonian physics. Until it became so obvious that they must be onto something, or we must need a new theory, because Newtonian physics falls apart at a very large or very small scale. That's how we got quantum mechanics. That's how we got celestial mechanics. They're not perfect. Folks are still looking for a universal theory of everything, because what we've got right now is a bunch of half-baked theories that do a pretty good job of explaining some phenomenon, but don't really tie other phenomenon together. And this is the essence of the goal of creation, is to make creation that makes sense all the way along. So you've got a grand fractal that doesn't have any breaks in it. A break in the fractal is a mismatch of theories. And until those theories are made to match, that's what drives these scientists that are looking for universal theories. They know something is fundamentally makes them unhappy about this mismatch. They know it doesn't have the purity of how they would create a system. And if you dig underneath any scientist, you will find somebody who ultimately, in some way, shape, or form, wants to be a god. Wants to be so good at their field that they do something that will never be assailed, that will make their name go down through the ages as the inventor of blah. Now that's vanity, that's ego, but that's healthy ego. It's what drives all people to accomplish whatever they want to accomplish. Anybody who tells you, I have no ego, I killed my ego, I'm living in ego death now, so I can preach nirvana. They are lying to themselves, and they are lying to you. It may be a useful white lie, But it's a lie just the same, and it's going to cause problems. It's going to cause discontinuities. And this is essentially where we're going with this event. It's discontinuities resolving themselves. What do I mean by that? Well, you've got to think past this lifetime to understand the apocalypse. Okay? You will all die. I'm going to die. That's the nature of the human vehicle. It's programmed. It's designed not to last for more than about 100 years. Now, there are people working on extending it, and yes, in the past, humanoid vehicles were able to live longer. The stories of the Bible were true. The king lists of the Sumerians were true, to some extent, maybe garbled a little bit to play political games. And it's interesting to see the different versions and the explanations that scholars are trying to come up with to rationalize why those versions exist. And this is how we expose cult Marxism of thousands of years ago. It's not a new thing. We just have a word for it because the Marxist ideology has given a very, very scientific way of basically playing an oppressor narrative to gain power. That's the essence of Marxism. It's not a populist ideology at all. In fact, any group, even the elite, can be cult Marxists, and that's what it's being used for now. The globalist elite are cult Marxists. They are gaining more power, the already more powerful, manipulating useful idiots with Marxist tactics. That's the essence of the identity politics that people are being broken into and put into groups that feel, well, as long as my particular hot topic, hot issue, my identity, the issue I identify with is, I will vote for anybody, even if everything else that they're doing is stinks. This is the lesser of two evils argument, right? Well, what is the lesser of two evils? It's the one who pats your back the most. And that is some people's idea of democracy. Well, I'm going to vote for whoever gives me the most shit, most stuff. So, I mean, you've got it playing out in the U.S. right now. When the Democrats were in charge of things, well, let's just print more money and give everybody a lot of stuff and invite all the people to come over the border and just make more money and just build more things, and that will drive the economy and everything will be perfect, right? And now the Republicans are in charge. Well, let's end income tax. That's something everybody can get behind, except where does the money come from? Then, is everything in government something that you should shut down? All those folks receiving Social Security, depending on income, actually paid into the system for 40, 50 years, looking forward to finally being able to retire from whatever stressful work they were doing. Those folks are insane. They're going to destroy the country. They're going to cause the country to go into another civil war. They are so polarized by their ideology, their cult ideology, that they can't see anything else. They can't see all the things they're going to destroy by winning. And this is how the adversary wins the apocalypse. By getting creation to destroy itself instead of evolving. Now, I'm here to tell you that this event is done. God is incarnated. He's been around for a while, has been observing creation, has woken up from a baby's zero consciousness perception of the world, has had all kinds of programming that tried to get him stuck in one little bubble so he didn't wake up anymore and observe the full experiment. Get to the point of being a complete God again, the 12th level of consciousness. That's done. He's hit the 12th level. The rest of the game is up to you, folks. That part is done. You're not going to change that part. You're not going to change the laws of the multiverse in any very large way. You can try, and that's noble. And there will be, I don't know, maybe a handful, maybe a whole bunch of messiahs that pass their test and get to play the next round in the prime universe as one of the, or even have their own universe of creation as a senior creator. That's where you get to be if you graduate to God level. And this species will be a God level species when this is over. I don't know how much of it is going to be left, or if what remains of it is only going to be half-breeds. There are other species that are already actively collecting human DNA and combining it with their own so that they can partake of the benefits of what this chosen species has accomplished. They don't even know what we did, most of them. They don't even believe in God, but they know that, wow, there's something special going on that planet. I want part of it. Some think, well, we're going to make these into the perfect slaves because they're almost perfect slaves. We just need to figure out a way how to program them better, make them more obedient, put little buzzers in their brains that fry them anytime they try to disobey an order. I don't know what they're doing. There are a lot of agendas out there, and frankly, from a macro standpoint, it really doesn't matter. If humanity is completely wiped out, or if it turns into a species that serves the adversary, Borg, it becomes a hive mind controlled species by some other species that's controlled by the ultimate hive mind, and serves the enemy in the next round of the battle. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It will matter to you, though, because you are here now. You are incarnated as a human being, and you have an opportunity to change the road you're on. How do you change that road? Well, you've got to decide to either break with your programming or figure out which programming is really healthy for your soul. And I can tell you, very few of you, especially the ones that think, well, I'm going to be one of the survivors because I've been prepping and I've got this and I've got that and you know, I've got my network of people and we're going to go up in the hills and we're going to survive whatever happens. Or if you're one of the ones, well, Jesus is going to help me. Jesus will help me through this. I just have to trust to Jesus and let Jesus guide me. I'm sorry. You folks aren't going to be the survivors. No, you're not going to end up in a bad place. You'll end up in the Christian heaven. One of the Christian heavens. If you're very devoted and you actually really do believe in Jesus, you're going to get a chance to souls who use Jesus as a crutch, like you do, and see how dangerous that can be, how it can actually cause pain, how happy little lies can cause pain, how it will cause pain in this apocalypse. The believers in the book are as just as much at risk as anybody else. Maybe more, because if they really believe this bullshit that's in Apocalypse, that God is going to come riding in and whoop ass, blah, 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 blah. This isn't how it works, folks. It might be in some fantasy universe that doesn't obey the laws of physics and chemistry. And that may be the simulation of Apocalypse that you'll actually experience, because a lot of the dark gods work like the Matrix. They give happy little fantasies to the people they can attract to their universe, while they milk their spiritual energies for all it's worth. And that's where a lot of you are going to end up. And it's going to be because you didn't really take a stand for yourself. You didn't demonstrate that you deserved more. How do you demonstrate you deserve more? By showing that you can be original, responsible creator. It doesn't take a whole bunch to do that, but it takes being willing to stand by your art, your ideas, even when they're not popular, even when they cost you visibility. They get you shadow banned. They get you persecuted, maybe even killed. Those are going to be the real martyrs in this apocalypse. And there will be many martyrs, no matter what happens. Lives will be ended early. Always are. Because there are, until creation actually becomes perfect, there will always be dark souls in the midst of lighter souls. Especially in the physical universe, because that's the sorting place. That's the place where new souls come into existence. They grow and they evolve. In the heavens and hells, that's another reality that serves to guide them towards better incarnations. Well, you spent that life trying to be an artist, and you turned your back on everybody that loved you. You started to do drugs, especially psychedelic drugs, because you thought it inspired you more, and you ended up living on the street and doing harder drugs, dealing drugs, because that was a good way to make money to support your ability to do your art. And you know what? I just don't think you've got it in you to be a responsible artist. Let's choose something else. That's the kind of challenge you get in heaven. You get to see all the dark things that your passions brought out of you, all the bad choices you made that hurt others, just because of your selfish desire to push ahead, to get credit for things that you didn't really deserve, to claim credit that others deserve, to cast blame on others that you really deserved. Those are darknesses that are not allowed in God's prime universe of creation. The most perfect yet physical universe is the one that has evolved to be self-sustaining, self-evolving, self-creating, and has had a number of timestamps placed in it which define an expanding midpoint of time. That's how time works. Time is a continuum. It's a string, and we're about to make this string much longer. This is the event at a big standpoint, and you're not forced to play on this string. And you can play any kind of melody on it. If you just want to vibrate in the smallest little area of this string, you can devote your future incarnations to trying to find a better way for the Roman Empire, or the Roman Republic, to transition to a better republic instead of the empire. Knock yourself out. Alternate history is something you can do. And if you can make a better timeline that way, souls are welcome to come and play your game instead of God's game. That's real freedom there. That's what God has given you, setting all this up, giving you the ability to design it yourselves. It hasn't been easy. It's taken a lot of time, a lot of baby steps, a few steps back. None of those steps back was done to you by God. Especially in the last day of creation, when God has been struggling to wake up just like all of you have, eating his own dog food. The day before that, you can blame everything on karma. Or actually, during this day, you can blame everything on karma because she was awake and God wasn't. The day before that, well, you can maybe blame God a little bit. Yeah, but it was karma that was growing up then. And before that, it was other souls involved in this big experiment that were growing up, particularly the two souls that began the Big Bang. Now, they kind of had done a lot of dark things while they were growing up. Lucifer and Lilith have a lot of darkness associated with their names, and for a reason. Lucifer, because he's the impetuous child, first child of God, who created without looking, couldn't wait to try out an idea, wanted to implement it everywhere all at once. Perfect guy to start a Big Bang, right? Part of it. Lilith is his polar opposite. There was not sex in that time, but you can think of her as female, and that's how we've come to think of her, as the divine female. And she is the destroyer. She wants to destroy everything that Lucifer created. That's her nature. She got roped into this Big Bang thing, not as a volunteer, as somebody who was tricked into it through flattery, through, oh, you know what, you're my favorite sibling. This is how Borg works, this hive mind controller. You're my favorite sister. I can't go myself. I'm so scared, and because I think I've got too much of God in me to be a good adversary to Lucifer. But I know you could do it because you're really strong and tough, and boy, you hate Lucifer. I can see it in your thoughts. You'd be the perfect one to be the other force, the adversary in the whole of creation. Wouldn't you love to do that? And she goes, well, I don't know. I'm not. Yeah, and then, the continued until she agreed to be his representative in the anti-universe and be the representative of the adversary, the destroyer, the Kali, the Shiva. She's had both male and female incarnations. She comes to be associated with female through, I think, mostly because of the effect of folks that are aware of Lucifer and want to cover up for Lucifer's mistakes by blaming everything on Lilith. They both created a lot of havoc. That's what creation is about. You got to break a few eggs if you want to make an omelet. And they've broken so many eggs. God and karma don't break eggs. At least not when they're fully awakened. They've made some mistakes. Every soul makes a mistake when they incarnate, especially as a human. When you start out with as much core programming from your DNA about who you are as a man or a woman and what you're supposed to do from a biological standpoint, and as much programming as we get from our culture or other cultures we encounter, or the countercultures within our culture, it's a wonder any of us doesn't make a whole bunch of mistakes in the course of one incarnation. And many, many times, the gods, God, karma, Lucifer, Lilith have incarnated and made the same old mistakes they did before because they hadn't ever seen it from that point of view before. That's why we reincarnate. There's no such thing as perfection. If you think you're perfect, that's when you should be very, very worried, because that's when you become overconfident. When you're overconfident, you act without thinking. That is becoming unconscious. That's the very definition of consciousness, is thinking before you act, considering the alternatives. This is what karma teaches you. This is what God created karma for, so she could teach him. And, this is a good measure of maturity for those of you young kids out there. If you want to know if your ideas are really very good, go try to sell them to your parents. I mean, really try to sell them. Don't just go tell your parents you're full of shit, you're stupid. Look at this meme, look at that meme, look at that meme. What about this? What about that? Blah, blah. Have a real discussion and listen to their counter arguments and see if you can counter them. I know some of you are saying, well, look, we can print dollars all the time and it never causes inflation. I'm sorry, that's a lie. Modern money, monetary theory, MMT, that's so popular among the progressives, it is a lie. It may be sustainable if you have monopoly control over the world's money supply, but in fact, the only way you get that control is making everybody dependent on the dollar. If you stop printing dollars, they will hate you. That's what's going on right now. But that's what we're needing to do, because finally inflation is catching up with us. There is no such thing as a free lunch is true. Everything that's free has to be provided by somebody else. If you take it from that somebody else, they will be unhappy. And that's bad karma. That is tyranny. That's the cardinal karmic sin that I preach about. If you kids get together and vote in somebody that's going to take money from people who have very little of it and cause more inflation so their money will go even less far, they are going to hate you. And they are going to fight you tooth and nail. Now, if you're on the other side of the fence and you think, well, we just need to abolish the Fed and we just need to end income tax, these absurdist, ultra-conservative, ultra-right positions, you're just as bad. Maybe those things shouldn't have been created in the first place, but they are part of the landscape now. You don't just suddenly make the magic carpet disappear and let all the writers fall into the sea. I'm sorry, that's a bad genie. Just as bad as the good genies of the other tide. This is what's going on in the apocalypse, and this is how you're going to know if you're playing on the right team. Because the right team is a team of sanity. Is not going to join one army or another. Is going to be the voice of reason that says, hey, what are we doing here? Why are we having these battles? Let's sit down and talk about it. Get everything out in the open. Honestly, not selling delusions and lies, having facts. Documented facts, examples from personal experience, from real data, not doctored data, not just the data that supports your position, like some of the corrupted scientists of Big Pharma have been doing and are getting caught at now with their pants very much down. And the thing you've got to remember through all this is the scapegoating. When the powerful begin to realize that the apocalypse is not about their godhood, their power, but about another power that they maybe weren't aware of, finally stepping in and saying, no more of this. And that power is God and karma, acting through many, many agents who believe in a just creation, who believe in patient, responsible creation, who don't want to just throw out the baby with the bathwater. They'd like to see how something could evolve. If you're an American and you think the Constitution is full of shit and you need to just rip it up and start over, you are not an American. You are a foreign agent. You are representing the enemy of the United States. The very foundation of the United States is the Constitution. It's not perfect. But if you just tear it up, you're doing exactly what every other faction has done to try to gain power. That's why the Constitution has been so compromised, so corrupted. It's not the Constitution itself, it's what people have done with it. Work to make it better. We have new problems that they did not have in those days. The Constitution had no internet. It had no mass media. The mass media of its day was the local newspaper and the occasional ship from somewhere else that brought, or stagecoach from somewhere else that brought news from afar. So we need to improve the Constitution, but the Constitution provides a means for doing that. Doing it legally, doing it responsibly, not in a way that destroys the whole principle of it, of having a fair and just country, equal opportunity for all, with one set of laws that apply to all, liberty and justice for all. That's got to mean something, or whatever government you come up with is going to mean nothing. It's going to be just like China, going to be just like Vladimir Putin's USSR, the chief oligarch of all the oligarchs, running everything and killing anybody in the press that they don't like. Anybody, I mean, do you actually look at the news and see how many people are accidentally falling off buildings, accidentally committing suicide in China and Russia? Do you think those are your friends? Americans? Yet, I hear all the time you guys pointing to one or the other as, see, they got things right. We're the ones that are screwed up. They fucked us up. It was a communist agenda from the beginning. And you know who the communists really were? The elite of the world, who wanted to come up with a new way to control you that worked better than the old world order. The new world order is a thing. It is a mechanism of control and manipulation by a very small number of people that control all the money, control all the resources. Those people are a very, very, very elite and select few. The only big difference between the old world order and the new world order that's all around us already is that the old world order was pretty much hereditary. There were relatively few revolutions. Peasant revolutions were put down. And you can only really rise in the old world order through military conquest or dynastic marriages. So, there were cases of bastards rising through the ranks and becoming kings. Little known fact by many of you, William the Conqueror was in fact a bastard. Was not the inheriting son of his father, the Duke of Normandy. He got it by grasping it because the legitimate heir died. And there have been many cases of that. That's how the old world order worked. The new world order may be a little bit nicer. We let people get into the exclusive club by creating mega corporations, especially mega corporations of tech and media. We let people become part of the exclusive, beautiful people of the New World Order by being useful PR mouthpieces in celebrity culture, pop culture. That's not an improvement, folks. And this is not the way it's supposed to be. This is essentially what we're going towards if we keep following the current globalist model. Humanity will become a hive species, or maybe multiple hives, ruled by essentially what becomes a bunch of pampered queens. That's exactly why we're seeing this globalist culture trend towards feminine superiority. This is the first step on the road to becoming a hive species. This is what humanity is heading for. Why? Basically, when reproduction becomes the prime focus of a species, which is the way it is in a bored species, in a hive mind, you're not interested in creation anymore, you're interested in conquest. And from a most fundamental viewpoint, conquest is a matter of reproduction, outcompeting other species for resources. And this is what's driving the attractiveness of that. This is kind of a humanist religion. Those who say, well, I'm not religious, I'm a humanist, I'm a secular humanist. This is your religion. Effectively, you worship this species, and you think that anything that needs to happen to further this species, or at least the part of it that you consider your tribe, is the most important thing to do. And this is what's essentially behind the tribalist breakdown of our society. Because you make your tribe the god, the thing that has to be preserved at all costs. This works for the adversary, because you either become assimilated in bigger tribes, and eventually humanity becomes part of one big tribe that serves the hive mind that assimilated you, or you self-destruct in all these little tribes that are so augured in on their one perspective of perfection that they can't possibly get along with each other. And this is the message that I preach through omnism. That every point of view is valid so long as it's tolerant, so long as it is acceptive of changing one's mind in the evidence of overwhelming truth of something else. Now, I give you what I consider the truth on my channel. It will come as difficult truth for many people who have very strong ideas of who God is, what humanity is, where we came from, where we're going, what the meaning of life is. I would argue that what I preach is essentially the bigger picture that encompasses all these other truths. And as I've told you, you can be an omnist Christian, or an omnist Muslim, or an omnist Hindu, an omnist scientist, an omnist agnostic. You can't really be an omnist atheist, because that's antithetical to the idea of omnism. Omnism is the approach that says all beliefs, all ideas have a certain validity, should be considered. And this is why I attack cult Marxism so much. A cult rejects out of hand anything that doesn't fit with their dogma. And there is nothing more cultish than cultural Marxism. It says this is what is beautiful, this is what is true. And if you don't like it, if you say one bad thing against it, then you are an enemy. This is how they behave. This is how cult Marxists behave. This is how the folks defending pedophiles, defending groomers of children are behaving. If you don't like it, you're a bad guy. You must be a Trumpy. You must be a arch conservative. You must be a conspiracy theorist. I'm sorry, folks. You've lost it. You're so far off in the weeds of cult Marxism, of joining the cult of Borg, you don't even realize that you're being assimilated. And you're not going to be happy with my message. This is why it doesn't get out to very many people. Why some of my episodes get blocked, silenced, downrated, shadow banned. There's a lot of folks that don't like what I'm saying because it rains on their parade. It rains on their power trip. Sorry, I'm going to keep telling the truth as I see it. I don't care who I step on. I don't care how many subscribers I get or lose. I don't care, because I know the truth, and I'm going to share the truth until my dying day. And I don't care when that is or how it comes. I'm going to be among those who get through this event on God's team. I don't know where I'll end up. I think I'm going to be a God again. I have been before. And I think I've earned another chance at it with this life. But, that's for the judges of the judges to judge. And I'm not a judge right now. I have judgment. I make judgments. They may not always be right. I believe I'm open-minded enough to change, and I have changed my judgments many times. Anybody who's known me throughout my life knows that I have gone in many different directions, politically, spiritually, behaviorally, passionately. I've worn a lot of different hats. I think that's an indication that I've become a very good judge. At least a good judge of what's good for me. And that's what I try to teach you, is the way to discern what is good for you in the context of your current incarnation and where you might want to go in your next incarnation. That, from an individual standpoint, is how you define good. It's not so easy to define it because it's a very individual thing. It's much easier to define evil and identify evil. But even that is difficult because it's easy to cover up evil. And we have only to look at the example of the Soviet Union and Communist China, shining examples of how evil was covered up. The deliberate murder of people was sold as patriotic. The only way that we could move forward with the revolution was to eliminate anti-revolutionary elements. They talk like that, and they did that. If you think anything else, if you think that the Tiananmen massacre was all made up, if you think that the Holocaust was all made up, if you think Stalin's purges and pogroms were all made up because you love Putin and you love Russia, you're insane. You are certifiably insane. You are delusional. And somebody needs to tell you, and that's when I'm telling you this. I absolutely intend you to be offended if you fall into any of these groups, because you need to be offended. You need to have your face slapped. I'll mention one of my favorite Monty Python episodes has the fish slapping theme. A lot of it has people slapping each other with fish, which, you know, kind of the joke is that that's sort of how Christians look to other people. They're taking this religion of the fish and slapping them with you know, what would Jesus do? And it's funny in that context, but it really is what people need to wake up to, out of their little trough of dogma that they've been programmed to act and think out of. You've got to break that programming, and it requires sometimes a slapping incident. And that's why so many people are being canceled now. So many influential people are being silenced because the slapping that they're doing is starting to hurt. Folks like Jordan Peterson. I don't know about this other guy from Romania, whether he was a good guy or a bad guy. So I'm not going to comment on him, but I can tell you that Jordan Peterson is a good guy. He's not always right. I don't always agree with him. But he is a great fish slapper. And if you're going to put him down, if you're going to agree that he should be silenced, should be sent to re-education camp, you're playing for the wrong side, folks. I'm sorry. You will be going to what I consider hell. Don't take my word for it. You'll know when you get there. And it may seem like heaven to you. But trust me, it will be hell. And it's going to be hard to get back. You're not going to get the chances you had during day 7 of creation. We're past the experimental phase of this planet, this species. We finished the experiment. It works. Karma works. We just need to go introduce it and spread it throughout the multiverse, outside of this little test tube of this planet. This is the true meaning of true prophecy. the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised, incorruptible. Incorruptible. Why incorruptible? Because if they're corrupted, their souls aren't going to be in this universe. Or they're not going to be in a soul vehicle that provides much corruptibility. They're going to be back to being beasts again. And this is what the mark of the beast really means. There are two kinds of beasts. There are sheep, the beasts that need to be programmed because they don't really have any creative thoughts of their own, and they'll get in trouble if you don't keep them in a pen and feed them well and shave off their coats when they get too long. Tell them to do whatever the sheepdog tells them to. And there are wolves. Those are animals too. The wolves are the ones that want to go take advantage of everybody else and want to go be the top predator. Get the power. Those are both beasts, and those are both souls that are marked as not being the kind of souls that we want playing the game of creation in the prime universe. There are secondary universes where they can play, where their games will be tolerated still. This is another topic that I wanted to bring up in this talk, is the idea of primary and secondary creation. Primary creation is coming up with a totally new, original idea that works. Okay? That's how God creates. That's how the senior creators who have risen to the level of God create. Secondary creation is re-implementing, regurgitating a good idea and putting a little new lipstick on the pig, or on the Picasso, or on the Beethoven, or whatever. Okay? Derivative works are secondary creation. And that's okay. There are universes that specialize in secondary creation. And those are the feeder universes for the prime universe. If a soul happens to generate something in the universes of secondary creation that, wow, that's pretty good, I think we ought to test that in the prime universe. That's when you get a chance to become a god. When you go from being just a creator to a creator. Maybe getting your own universe to create in and test in. Okay, we don't just let any old soul have their own universe and get to make their own perfect video game. You got to learn how to do it first. Just like, ask any video game company. Do they take any bozo off the street that says, I want to make the perfect virtual reality game, social media game, and so give me money to do it? No, they don't do that. They take people that have proven themselves doing similar stuff, work their way up, and have some credentials to show that they are worthy of being hired by their creative team. And if they don't deliver, they fire them. That's how it works, folks. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Anybody who tells you that there is, they are telling you a lie of spiritual bypassing. Anybody that tells you, all you got to do to go to heaven is say, I believe in Jesus, that is a lie. I'm sorry. It's a bold-faced lie. It may be a white lie. It may make you feel good. It may make you feel better about the bad things you've done. It doesn't erase them. Karma is with you forever. Every choice you make is recorded in your Merkaba. becomes part of your soul. You don't erase history. You don't erase any choices, any experiences you've ever had. They all accumulate to make this unique field of your spiritual energy, which is the real you behind however you manifest in a physical vehicle, or in a spiritual vehicle, or in a God vehicle. There's a real you behind that, that is who you are to God, to the first creator, who is the only one that is fully aware of the multiverse when he's not traversing somewhere else and left his double, his AI double, in charge. And God can do that. That's how we can move about different universes. That is why you can travel time. You can travel through dimensions. You can do a lot of things once you become a god. In fact, you're doing it now. You just aren't aware of it because you're not a god. Every time you have this Mandela effect, deja vu, you find yourself waking up on the highway and thinking, wow, I wasn't even asleep, and it was like I was asleep. And I didn't know what was happening, but there's just a chunk of my life missing, and God, it's a miracle I didn't have an accident. You did. In another universe. And you're not going to know whether that's you or the replacement you that's going forward. The you will have not only your memories of that life, but will have the full memories of every life and every level of consciousness that you've conquered already, and carry that forward into future incarnations. The copy you is just going to have the memories of that current incarnation and some of the basic programming that soul had from previous incarnations. Maybe a vague idea of where they came from. Like, oh, I have this real affinity for Egyptian culture. I think I was Cleopatra in a past life. Have you met somebody like that? I've met so many Cleopatras. It's a very popular one for the women. You can tell who's had a real past life experience and who is just faking it, I call it. It's not really faking it because you probably have the memory of those times encoded as part of your program you got when you became an independent soul. And these newbies, these wink-in souls, these virtual souls, are very much like Pinocchios. That's why some people sort of derogatively call them NPCs, non-player characters. They act very much like they're programmed because that's what they are. They are a copy of the original soul that's running a program. And it'll keep running that program until an event happens that shocks them out of it. They have to make a decision that isn't covered by their programming. And that's when that soul will start its path towards consciousness. So, in summary, it doesn't happen in the order of revelations. There are events there that are going to be symbolic to you. You will see patterns that match patterns. That's how prophecy works. Different people will match that to different patterns, and they will take a different meaning from it. And that's why you have so many different ideas of what the number of the beast is. So many different ideas of who the Antichrist is, or the Christ. Well, I'm telling you, there are many Antichrists and many Christs. There is only one that deserves a capital C. because this event is all about the return of God to full consciousness within the latest version of karma. This is a 12-dimensional consciousness. Now it's interesting, if you note what's going on in the physics world, the most advanced physicists have posited that there are 11 dimensions. I think that's going to give us the unified theory that solves everything, and there's a whole bunch of physicists working on that presumption. They're close. What they're confused about is that we're in a transitional period from 11 to 12. The 12 has not been proven in. It was implemented with the completion of day 6 of creation, when karma woke up to a level that God said, you know what, karma's ready to fly on her own. I'm going to let her run the multiverse for a while, observing the experiment, and I'm going to become part of the experiment. Not just an active part, an aware part like I've been before. I'm going to take this bitter pill of reincarnation amnesia and forget everything and see if I can learn through this new system of training and education. That's what's been happening for day 7 of creation, and it's been a very, very long day. It goes back to the very first interplanetary species that evolved from this planet, from this solar system, which wasn't even an organic species. It goes back to elemental species, the jinn, the creatures of pure energy. Long time. We're getting ready to have a really big celebration for those of you that happen to show up in the right universes. I mean, every universe is going to have their own kind of celebration when this event is done. For some of them, it's going to be more like a wake. It's going to be an admission, well, you know what? Got to let you guys in on a secret. You weren't playing for the right team. Now, we still got our own universe to play in here, but, we're not going to be able to go mess around with this prime universe anymore. We're going to have to be stuck with the anti-prime universe, the Borg universe, where, there's a few good guys left there to kill, but mostly they're getting out as quick as they can. As soon as they realize they're in the bad place, they pretty much just want to die and get reborn in the good place. So there's not going to be much left for us to do. And mostly we're going to have to deal with power struggles within our own organization. And that's why I'm cutting everybody's ration of spiritual energy down to about this much. And if you don't like it, act tough because I'm bored. That's how it's going to work in some way. It won't be so much of a celebration. In the God-oriented universes, it's going to be more like, well, we got some good news and some bad news. The good news is that you're playing on God's team. The bad news is you didn't make the first string. It's still cause for celebration because we just had a big victory over the adversary. And we're going to hand out our little awards for our universe's Oscars. We're going to have a little commiseration for those that you don't see around you anymore. Sorry, they were playing on the other team. And if they were your best buddy and your good friends, well, you can go play on their team if you want to, but you're not going to play here anymore. I know that's going to be a great shock, and some of you are going to be so grieved that you don't want to play here anymore, and that's your right, that's your choice. But we're going to celebrate our little victory, a little piece of a bigger victory, and then we're going to go on and keep playing the game, maybe with a little bit more openness and honesty, so we don't get taken out by the next cut, because the prime universe is where you want to be. And unless you want to go create your own universe, you want to have your own. You want to have a universe where you feel at home. And we have to tell you some things that may not make you feel as at home anymore. And those are going to be tough truths for people. Heaven's not going to be the same place you were before. If you're a Christian, the next heaven you're going to go to is going to be telling you the truth behind a lot of white lies that Christians have been told, and asking you to forgive them for lying to you. They did it in what they felt was a good cause, to further creation, to help combat the adversary, and or provide R&R for those that had been damaged by the adversary and needed a little bit of a break. That's another type of universe there is out there, another type of heaven. They're going to be more honest and open now because there's no more secrets necessary. Anybody that's keeping secrets after day 7 is concluded. Anybody that's still, I'm privy to the mysteries. I'm in the mystery cult. I'm in a secret organization that has knowledge nobody else can have. If you fall in any of those camps, I'm sorry, you're playing for the bad guys now. There's no need for any more secrets. The only reason there was any need for any secrets till now is because you were in a social experiment. If you know anything about doing social engineering experiments, you know that if the subjects of the experiment know too much about what's going on, they can change the result. Either placebo effect, thinking, I know the experiment, I know how I want it to turn out, therefore I'm going to do things that make the experiment come true, which is essentially the whole book of Revelations. All prophecy are basically trying to create self-fulfilling prophecy. This is a component of all prophecy. It's what you want to happen because you're playing on a particular team. You have a particular set of biases. So, at any rate, wherever you're headed, there is still time to change the road you're on. Don't be what I call a numby-gumby. Someone who is insensitive to how they've been programmed and led to be a partisan to some particular team that thinks they know what creation is all about, or what needs to happen with this species. I promise you, the folks that are actually guiding the experiment, guiding the path of humanity, are not these bozos like Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, not even guys like Elon Musk. He is having a Messiah incarnation. He's challenged. He's not sure yet whether he's a good guy, and he's done bad things. He's contributed to the delinquency of a species by feeding our insatiable lust for technology, by buying into the absurd narrative that electrical vehicles are more green than combustion engine vehicles. That's a lie. It might be true sometime, but what the truth of it is, which you can research for yourself, is that lithium, which is one of the main components of current EV batteries, and cobalt, another of the key ingredients, are both incredibly environmentally damaging to produce. In fact, one of them, lithium, was one of the inventions of Lilith. Her first invention after she decided, well, okay, I've got this universe thing down. I'm gonna turn that over to a program version of myself, and I'm gonna go play the new game of creating elements. Lilith was the creator of lithium, a very, very dangerous, highly combustible, very, very difficult to work with, but very useful element. There are better ways to make batteries, and we'll discover them eventually. But as long as we're on lithium technology, that is not the be-all, end-all solution. As long as we are not able to produce electrical power in the amounts that we need to charge all the electric vehicles, if we replace all the combustion vehicles, there are going to be new coal-fired power plants in countries like Russia, in countries like Iran, in countries like China, who don't give a flying flip about their people. They just want to win the game of geopolitics. And they're willing to win that game because they think they are going to be the godfather of a materialist, humanist world. And they'll get to dictate the peace. That is what winning war is about. It's about being the one who gets to dictate the peace. Now, if you know anything about World War II, you know that the Allies would not have won if it had not been for the United States. And the United States emerged as the de facto dictator of the peace. Although it was kind of a poor dictator because United States foreign policy was very weak. We didn't force anything on anybody. We actually, the one who forced much of the post-war world were Churchill and Stalin. They're the ones that set up the Cold War, and America was an unwitting victim. And it was that weakness that allowed the U.S. to be colonized by forces of fascism and communism, which are both ultimately forces of the New World Order. America was set up after World War II to be the fall guy. Right now, to be the one that everybody blamed for what was going to come. And they were perfectly prepared to destroy the United States, to have us be the scapegoat, to finally bring the New World Order, which restored the powers of Asia and the powers of Europe to domination of the world. That's the goal. That's what's happening, folks. That's why Brazil is in the midst of social upheaval, very similar to the United States. They don't want Africa and South America to take their rightful place in the world. They want to destroy them. They want to enslave them again under a new world order. They want America, North America, to be enslaved as well. They want their own countries to be enslaved. They want Europe enslaved. They want Asia enslaved. They want a new world order. What is a new world order? The new world order would be another version of the old world order with a little different spin to it. Instead of popes and Dalai Lamas and Chinese emperors, the divine emperors of China, You would have the divine celebrities and spokespeople for big corporations and big media and big tech as the clergy. And the nobility would be all the people that benefited from that. The CEO class, the politicians, the NGOs that run everything behind everybody's back in the UN. This is New World Order, same as the Old World Order. Even worse, though, because it doesn't even have any kind of a spiritual basis. It's rooted in Marxist ideology, which is anti-religion. God doesn't exist, karma doesn't exist, you can do whatever you want, get what you can during one lifetime, go for it. How much of that messaging do you hear in commercial advertising? How much of it do you hear in political posturing? It's our turn. We've got to play as dirty as the other side or we're going to lose. This is Satan. This is satanic. This is Antichrist talk right there. And you're playing on that right into that narrative if you're falling down that path. And it really doesn't matter who wins. This is all an illusion, but it's an important illusion because it's governing where your soul is going, what's going to happen next. And it is it is dependent on what you do with this lifetime, wherever you're at. Whether you're a peasant in, remotest Africa, or whether you're sitting on a committee in the new Congress, you are being tested at your own level. Tested with your own ambitions, tested with your own values, your own commitment to what you actually believe in. And I promise you that most of you don't actually believe in God. You don't have the faintest idea who God is or what's going on here. You may think you know God, you may think you're playing on God's team, but if you're playing for power, you're playing for the adversary. If you think it's just a matter of, well, if my side wins, we get all the power and we can dictate to the other side, then everything will be perfect. I'm sorry. This is Antichrist thinking. The Christs are not going to be the ones that rich and famous and powerful and travel the world giving speaking events, and well, they might be if that's what's important for the plan. Or they might be because that's a universe where a different God is executing a different plan. I can't tell you how this whole thing is going to play out for you. I can tell you that it is an event, and you could call it an apocalypse, and it could be either good or bad. I know where I'm going, and we view the event as the cosmic jubilee, a big celebration, because we finally completed an entire seventh day of creation. The most difficult day so far, because we had to train that bastard God how to be human. That wasn't easy. That wasn't easy, and I tell you, everybody who was involved in that process needs to get an award. And they're going to get the ones that had the most critical parts to play are going to get their award right from the guy himself. Thank you. I don't know I could have done it without you. I don't think there's any way I could ever repay you for the sacrifices you've made, the times you were martyred, the times you did without because you knew there was a greater need. But I think the system that we've created is going to repay you in ways that I never could. So, whatever you do from here on out, think about being part of the Cosmic Jubilee. What are you going to do to prove that you deserve to be on God's team in day 8 of creation? There's still going to be a battle going on. This is just the biggest battle yet that we're winning on this planet, proving that the whole idea of creation worked. Now we got to go convince everybody else to play the same game. Many are not going to want to be convinced. There are going to be more battles. There are going to be more wars. And there will be wins and losses as there were before. This is the last time it will matter whether this planet survives. The infection is already spreading. The new karma is already spreading. All of these entities and species, multidimensional or same-dimensional, who are visiting our planet, have already caught karma. They've been catching it ever since the last incarnation of God woke up to full awareness. That was the real Christ, the real Jesus. Who knows who he was, where he was, when he was. It's very well hidden. It had to be very well hidden because the experiment was still going. The experiment is done now. The information is going to start creeping out. People will start having revelations that will fill in gaps. And it'll all start making sense. The more it makes sense, the more people will come to believe, oh, okay, now I understand. I can still be a Christian, but I'm going to be a better Christian if I really understand who God is. I can still be a Muslim, but I'm going to be a better Muslim because I know who Allah is, really. What Allah really wants. What Allah really hopes from all of us. Doesn't demand. Have I not hit anything I wanted to cover today? So, basically the lie, the white lie of the Gospels is that there is only one Messiah. And the other lie is that there is only one Antichrist. There are many Messiahs, many Antichrists pushing this event over the goal line. It's a team sport. It's a team sport that's gone back and forth, just like football. And a football where nobody scored yet, where the score means that you don't need to play this game anymore because you've tested out every possible way it could end, and you've come up with a system that it ends well. God's team always wins. Or God's team becomes more godly, if you can view it that way. It's not really a battle that's winning, it's a battle that is designed to make more souls fit onto God's team. Building a bigger ark, if you will. Think of that paradigm, maybe it would be a good way to view the event. You know the story of Noah's Ark. Well, if it was semi-based in truth, humanity was reduced to a few couples, Noah and some of his immediate family, and what animals they could bring aboard. The ark of today is going to be much bigger. And it's going to be not only carrying many species, it's carrying many souls. Many souls of many different species, many of which have never been to this planet. This is how the game works. Some of you are going to die, and you are going to go to a heaven that is going to be preparing you for being a part of a different species. Maybe a more advanced species that already is a God-level species. And some of you are already sensing that. You're sensing some affinity for the star people. Not all of them are good guys. Not all of the God-level species are actually playing on God's side. Being a God-level species means you can advance in consciousness to become a God. But you maybe are not operating in the final version of the rules that allow you to stay a God. That's why they're so afraid of the new version of karma. When it infects their species, their Earth, their home planet will have to undergo the same thing that we've been through till they advance as a species to the latest, highest level. There are God-level species out there that are 11th dimensional. We're going to be the first 12th dimensional species. We are the first 12th dimensional species. We have been since day 7 began. That's the final testing that had to happen with God incarnating, God trying it out himself and deciding it's basically a timetable too. There's a certain amount of time that God has to figure out who he is, decide if we're ready or not, and do some reprogramming, and then he has to go to sleep again. This is basically how this game has been working. And previous incarnations, God has been kind of keeping a low profile, doing a little tweaking here and there, doesn't want to give away the experiment. So you get false gods out of that. You get the Jesus, you get the Muhammad, you get the Buddha. Half-truths that hide the deeper truth that has to be hidden for the experiment to work. They're helpful little hints along the way. Pieces not quite there. This is why some people who are having a Messiah life will go crazy and not recover from it. End up in a mental asylum. There are many great minds who burn themselves out because they basically reached too far for the game to conclude successfully. And they became more or less a vegetable until they died, and then their soul was stored. They don't get to go immediately start doing their God thing because they're still stuck in this experiment. This is where the whole thing of the dead shall be raised. They're not dead, they're waiting. And this is kind of a little bit of the truth that shows up in some of the newer faiths of prophets that kind of went down the wrong road, anti-prophets, if you will, antichrist type prophets like Joseph Smith. There is much in the teaching of the Mormon faith that has some validity, just like other religions. Joseph Smith turned down the dark road to power, and so did his descendants, and this church is a church of power. Has some more useful beliefs about how things work, about there being a bunch of souls gathered that are waiting for a certain event to happen, and who know they have this idea that, well, okay, if I baptize all the souls that came before this event, then they'll be part of it and they can come with us. This is the whole nonsense of Mormonism. It doesn't work that way. There's no easy spiritual bypassing. The souls that have advanced to God level during this game will be at a crossroads. They will be released to go to the heaven that they are attracted to in this new system of the multiverse. In that heaven will happen what determines, okay, you've advanced to, you need to prove yourself in the new rules before you actually get to be a god. You've got to go incarnate again in the places that are allowed for you to incarnate, which will be limited, will not include the earth of the prime universe again. That's creation, sacred ground. If we're not sure of you, you're not going to get to go there right away. If you've done things in pursuit of power, if you've lied to people, if you've cheated, if you've stolen, if you've misled, sorry. Doesn't matter what great ideas you've had, you haven't been cognizant of karma. That's the way it works. So those of you from the Mormon faith, I don't talk about that very much, although I was raised in that area. Observing Mormons, I wasn't a Mormon. I was a transplant from a family that moved to Idaho for my dad to work at the nuclear testing site in central Idaho. I grew up in Idaho Falls amongst Mormons, not being part of them, but knowing a lot about that culture, being exposed to their theology and stuff, and I think it was useful, formative. I understand what they were going for. I understand how Joseph Smith probably did have some visions that were true visions, and like many of the visionaries of his age, misused them. This is why I don't have a lot of good to say about Tesla, who is another figure of cult worship right now, New Age cult worship. Tesla was a failed Messiah. He had visions, maybe, he had a very deeply spiritual nature, but his visions were dangerous, and he did irresponsible things with them. He sought out help from folks like J.P. Morgan, who were definitely compromised karmically. Using their money was basically tainting yourself with the taint of the get-rich-quick idealists of the American dream, and that is the dark side of the American soul. The idea that I'm going to get mine. That is the dark side of the American spirit. And then he used that money to go build his idea near a place, I can't remember what town it was in Colorado, but basically ended up taking down their power grid. Wasn't much of a grid at that age, but you know, that was a disruption. If a Tesla did the same thing now, well, they could easily bring down the entire power grid of the whole country. And there are budding Teslas out trying to do that right now, trying to figure out which are the so many power stations that need to be outed so I can bring down all the power in the U.S. and cause this great disruption that's going to bring the Great Revolution, and everybody's going to become one. And I don't know what kind of mythology these people are operating on, but they're dangerous. These folks are dangerous, and yes, there are folks organized behind those kind of terrorist agendas. And those are Antichrists. They may think they're doing a noble thing. They may think, well, the American Empire's got to die. It's the cause of all of evil, blah, 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 blah. I'm sorry, that is a cult Marxist view that is based upon delusions and lies, false narratives that have been spread by globalists and communists who want America to be the fall guy for what's happening, who actually don't care because even if they're American, they've already got a million different escape plans, and most of their assets are already offshore, invested in other currencies, digital or foreign, that they believe will be more valuable in the post-American world. These are evil people. They are not noble, not 1 ounce noble. No matter how much of a Robin Hood they present themselves to be. In whatever forum they present that. The World Economic Forum. You guys are a bunch of antichrists, and I don't mind telling you that. Chinese Communist Party, antichrists. Deep State, USA, antichrists. You may think you're doing the right thing for the U.S. if you're doing it through cult Marxism, through lies and deceit, and throwing some Americans under the bus for the benefit of others. You Bushes, you Obamas, you Bidens, you Trumps, you Clintons, you're Antichrist. Simple as that. It's hard to get on God's team. It's especially hard if you're in a position of power. So, even guys that are kind of on the fence like Elon Musk, this is not a place I'd want to be. It's a very tough fence you're straddling. And you better be open to a bigger picture. A bigger picture of what the future is going to be like, depending on what you decide to do, which team you decide to play on. I can't tell you when would be the right time to become a martyr. But ultimately, if you're in a position of power now, you're either going to be a martyr or you're going to be playing for one of the bad guys. To the extent that you hide the truth, you distort the truth, you use the truth creatively to achieve power. That's not the goal of this game. The winner doesn't get to be the godfather of Earth, godmother of Earth. That's not how you win the game. You don't win the game by being the last ashram standing. For those of you that think that you can just prep your way out of it, or pray your way out of it, or meditate your way out of it, it's not the way you play the game. You got to have skin in the game. You got to make some choices. You got to make difficult choices. And you're going to be faced with difficult choices no matter who you are in the coming years. And those choices will determine which version of the apocalypse you see, which version of heaven or hell you see, what opportunities you're going to have in your next incarnation. This is the truth. This is the real, God-honest truth. Not with any flowery bullshit around it like Revelations. Not some idiotic communist paradise that shows up in the Communist Manifesto. This is the way it works, folks. I'm a scientist and a spiritualist. I've been down both paths. I've seen all the roads you can take. And I found the one that was true and honest. And I'm going to stick on that road, and I know it's going to get me to salvation, my salvation. And I hope you find the same road for you, no matter where your path leads. With the Omnist Hour, like, share, subscribe, get involved if you want. I think I'm about ready to start preaching a little bit more widely lately, and it may be just about time, or maybe time for my martyrdom. I don't know. At any rate, tune in next time for the Omnist Hour. Happy Karma.